All right, welcome everyone. My name is Tom Cooney. On behalf of the Community Foundation of Mississauga, I would like to welcome you and thank you for attending today's session. This is our charitable giving series, Tax Minimization through Strategic Philanthropy. I am the chair of the endowment committee here at the foundation, and I'm also a senior wealth advisor with Asante Capital Management. Today's session is being recorded. And if you miss a couple of the details here and there, don't worry, you'll be able to see those again. That link will be available to you on our website. We will also have a question and answer period towards the end of Mark's presentation. If you do have questions for Mark, please feel free to enter those in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat throughout the session, and we'll bring those up to Mark towards the end of today's meeting. Now, as a financial advisor, I'm also actually a donor to the foundation. My wife, Stella, and I established the Cooney Family Fund a number of years ago. And from that perspective, I find it very interesting in that I can sit in my client's shoes quite easily to say, what is this thing all about? How does it work? Where do I get the information? How does it get implemented? It's really not that difficult. It's a straightforward process. There's lots of resources both on the website and also available directly through staff or volunteers. Implementation is very seamless, doesn't take a lot of time and effort. Then the recognition that's available can be customized to whatever your particular client's needs are. And also the ongoing reporting and grant making resources are very vital to us. I know Stella and I each year, when we are making our granting decision, we rely upon staff who have their pulse on the community of Mississauga through vital signs and other resources. They know what's going on and where the needs are greatest. So they make it easy to make a difference. And with that in mind, I'm now going to turn things over to our CEO of the Community Foundation of Mississauga, Glen Gamoka. Glen.
Glen, you're on mute. There has to be at least one person that we have to say, it's normally me.
Oh,
there we go.
Sorry about that, everybody. Didn't want to interrupt Tom, and I muted myself. So good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of the foundation, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today. I'm super pleased to have Mark Halpern here to join us today and share his insights and knowledge with us. I wanted to thank Tom, as he said, he's the chair of our endowment committee. I wanted to thank Tom for spending time today moderating today's session. And behind the scenes, Pauline Pabesma is doing all the technical work to make sure this webinar goes well. So thank you to Pauline as well. I'm going to just take 2 minutes to do a really brief introduction to the foundation, and then I'm going to turn things over to Mark because we want to give Mark as much time as possible to go through his presentation. But for those of you who are not familiar with the Community Foundation, we've been established for 20 years as a grant-making foundation here in the city of Mississauga. We're one of a large network of foundations, so 192 across Canada and growing, and we all support our local communities. And we work on an endowment model. And so every time somebody makes a donation or opens a fund with the Community Foundation, we pool all those funds together and they're held in perpetuity. Those funds are invested and are managed by a professional investment management firm, and we use the interest income from those funds to make charitable donations. Our organization currently has about $27 million in endowed funds. And over the course of 20 years, we've generated more than $21 million in grants to local charities. So I know that many people on the call today are professional financial advisors. And so I wanted to highlight a couple of advantages of working with the foundation. So Tom's mentioned a few already. But as you're working with your clients through the various stages of their investment planning and estate planning, a couple of things to keep in mind. Some of your clients may be thinking about setting up their own private foundation, and alternatively, they can open a donor advised fund with a community foundation such as ours. The real advantage in that is that you get to work with your client on all the fun aspects of running a foundation. You get to decide where the charitable giving will go, which charities you'd like to support, while we do all the back office operations for the foundation. So you can start up with a community foundation at no cost with no administration required. We do all the CRA reporting and tax receipting. And your clients can get started with a minimal contribution and build their fund over time if they choose. As Tom said, we also have very intimate knowledge of the community needs in Mississauga, and we have existing relationships with virtually every charitable organization in the city. So starting a donor advised fund with the foundation means you really hit the ground running and you maximize the impact that you have in the community right from day one. In addition, if you have clients that are interested in opening a fund with the foundation, you can continue to manage their funds through our professional investment advisor program. Pauline's going to put some links up in the chat to some information about our professional investment advisor program. So if you'd like to get more information about that, you can check out the link, or you can contact me directly. And so with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Tom and to Mark for the rest of the session. And I hope everybody enjoys today's session. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. It is now time to introduce our featured speaker. And our featured speaker today, Mark Halpern, is a certified financial planner, trust and estate practitioner, and has his Master Financial Advisor Philanthropy, MFA-P. Mark has helped business owners, entrepreneurs, professionals, and affluent families for 30 years. As CEO of wealthinsurance.com, Mark and his team provide tax-advantaged insurance solutions to protect families and their businesses. Mark's corporate goal is the creation of $100 million of new philanthropy annually, working with clients, nonprofits, and foundations, and collaborating with allied professionals in law, tax, insurance, investment, and estate planning. Mark has been married to Rhonda for 26 years, and they are kept very busy with their 5 children. The show is all yours, Mark. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much, Tom. And so nice to be here. And Glenn, really a pleasure. And yeah, on that last line about the children, we're actually making our first wedding in 7 days from today, May 26th in New York City. Our son is getting married. So a lot of action there, and another one of those life, milestones. So it's really quite beautiful. I'm really happy to be here because I'm always so excited to speak to professional advisors who are really the gatekeepers to all the good stuff that we're going to be speaking about. And I just think it's really important that we have that conversation together. And you're probably wondering, some people ask, like, Mark, why do you have a football over here? Well, I like to have this football. It was actually given to me this last Christmas by an investment fund that I work with in Canada. It's one of those expensive leather balls, and I thought it's kind of cool. But it made me think of 3 things that I like to share, and I don't want it to be kitschy, but I think it's really important for all of us. The first thing is that every one of our clients needs a quarterback. You need a quarterback who's going to basically lead a team, and our clients need a team of professional advisors. We're living in such a period of hyper specialty, and we need each person's unique vantage point when we're talking to clients. The second thing about quarterbacks is they're all about completions. And most of our clients have lots of incompletions. And our job is to get those completions done for them. And I think that's a very important part of our existence. And then the third thing is, the Super Bowl was great. Tom Brady's always marching down the field with 2 minutes to go and he's behind. Imagine Tom Brady throwing a touchdown pass. The crowd goes crazy. It's amazing. So happy they've won the Super Bowl. And suddenly a referee throws down a flag. Oh no, a penalty. It's a 50-yard penalty with no time left. Could you imagine how terrible people would feel? Well, the reality is with our clients as well, they could be going through their entire life going downfield to win their championship, whatever it is. But at the very end, there might be a referee that throws a 50-yard tax penalty on them. So our job is to get to them while the sun is shining, and clearly to make things available for them with options to help them. Now, I know for all of us, the last 2 years have been extremely busy. It's probably been the busiest last 2 years in our last 30 of professional practice. And that's because for 30 years, we tried to convince people they were going to die one day. And it took a global plague for people to be much more aware of their mortality than ever before, and those incompletions that they have. So obviously wills, powers of attorney, structures, insurance. But one of those areas of incompletion is the area of philanthropy or charity, or what I call going from success to significance. Yeah, they may have given money to, conquer cancer, rides to bury, but have they really incorporated strategic philanthropy into their planning? So today I'm going to share that with you. I will also just add that I'm on the board at Sick Kids Hospital, St. Joe's Hospital, St. Mike's, TV Ontario, the Jewish Foundation, and I just did a presentation to a hospital board, and I want you to know that at the very end, the lay president said this in front of the board and their donors. They said the following. They said, Mark, he said, I'm a reasonably intelligent person and I'm a reasonably successful person. but I probably only knew about 5% of what you talked about that today. How come I don't know about these things? And how come our major donors don't know about it as well? And I will tell you that that is really not the exception, that's the rule. What we're going to talk about today, I'm going to suggest 99% of advisors don't have a clue. As far as charities, maybe 90% of the charities don't know about what we're going to be talking about. And then professional advisor donors, they also don't know that they can create transformational charity with some structures and strategies that we have. So, I don't want to give everyone to drink out of a fire hose. There's going to be a lot here, but hopefully it's going to be the start of us continuing to discuss this as we go along. So I'm just going to put up our presentation and off we go. Okay. We have already the first glitch in the presentation because my computer is not, I'm going to have to hit a button. I apologize. Technical problems. It'll be up in just a second, God willing, and we will we'll start. There we go. Where did the presentation go? I'm just going to have to, we're just going to have to put a little hold on this for a moment. Sorry. Good. Hopefully this is going to work now. Let's put it up. Okay. Share. Sorry, everybody. Now, can everybody see that? Somebody just give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Fantastic. So first things first, whatever we discuss, make sure that you discuss with your professional advisors, even the people on your team as professionals. Now, we know a lot's been happening in Ottawa. We have an old new government, and apparently they are going to make it much easier for us going forward by introducing a new one-page simplified tax return for all Canadians with only one question. How much money did you make? Send it to us. Now, we joke around, but the reality is we all have a lot of taxes ahead of us. And I'm going to explain to you why I do what I do today. Like a lot of people ask, Mark, why do you share all of your your intel? And in Hebrew, we have a word called tzedakah. It's a Jewish word, and tzedakah is commonly defined as charity, but it actually means righteousness or justice. So there's actually a social and ethical obligation for us to give back. And I can either write a check myself, or I can teach other people how to write checks. And as a result, I can create a lot more money that way. And that's really where we're going with this. So I feel very blessed that I'm in a situation to share these ideas with you and to be able to share it with charities and other advisors and clients. And why is that? Because today's reality is taxes are going up. This is not an if, it's a when. We could potentially have taxes on inheritance, a wealth tax, a tax on principal residences. The last budget, we thought the capital gains tax would jump up to 75%. It's definitely something that our clients have to be made aware of. To add complication to that, our clients have done a lot of investing, but they haven't done planning. Planning is sort of making sure that all their income needs are looked after, but crystallizing the tax now and in the future and seeing that there's ways for them to preserve their estate or incorporate charity as well. We've also entered a misinformation age where people are going online for information and it's just not readily available. That's why we as advisors have to be the ones to bring this information to our clients. We've all heard of Freedom 55. Well, Freedom 55 today is when your youngest child is 55. And that's not a joke. Our kids getting out of school, strapped with debts, trying to find jobs, trying to buy real estate in the GTA, it's just not possible. So people have to really be doing that planning even more so for the future to help out the next generation. The good news is that people are looking for meaning, especially the millennials who are willing to pay more than retail if there's a social impact portion of that. People do want to go from what we call success to significance, and we just have to show them how to do that. Now, I mentioned in terms of some of the initiatives that are being done out there, this is an initiative that was launched in September by the Canadian Association of Gift Planners called Willpower. This actually had its origins back in the UK over 10 years ago, where the statistics said that everyone who had a will in the UK, only 5% had actually included a bequest in their will to charity. So what they did was they gathered together money from all the nonprofits, and they bought retail advertising, TV, radio, print, billboard, with a very simple message: leave a gift in your will. Don't disinherit your family, adopt a charity and disinherit the tax department. After 10 years of all of this advertising, the statistic went from 5% to 9%. That delta represents $50 billion of charity in the UK. We've now launched this in Canada with a goal of creating $40 billion of charity in Canada. And this is a program that all of us can get involved with. Go to willpower.ca, connect with Lori Fox. It's a great program. Get your name out there and be known that you're in the philanthropy business for your clients. Really a great initiative. Now, I mentioned that I started 30 years ago, but my real start in business was actually March the 8th, 1974. And that's when my father of blessed memory died of a massive heart attack at the age of 50. I was 11 at the time. I was the youngest of 4 boys. And my mother, who was 48 at the time, had to go back to work to support her family. Why was that? Because my father was a busy engineer, and there was no will, there was very little savings, and there was no life insurance. So it was very hard for us. But fast forward, I work with some of Canada's most affluent business owners and entrepreneurs, professionals, sports athletes, and families, and you'd think they'd have it all organized and together. But I'm going to suggest that 85% of the time, it's not true. They're so busy looking after everything and everyone else that when it comes to themselves, things are not organized or efficient. So we do 3 things really well in our business. One area that we're involved with is in estate planning. So making sure that people's financial architecture that they started with and the furniture that they have, the financial furniture, matches up with today's reality. The second area we're involved with is in tax minimization strategies, using tax-exempt insurance to preserve estates. And then the third area is really philanthropy, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's really helping people create philanthropic legacies for their families, often by converting taxes into charity. And it's really, I wish I could say that people call me and say, Mark, I'd like to give $10 million here or $5 million here. I do get those calls, but it really has to come out of a holistic planning process. This is just a big picture of all the things that we cover off with our clients. But at the very end, we talk about that charity begins at home. But what we want to do is introduce ways to convert taxes into charity to create enduring legacies for families. Is that something you'd be interested in? So we go to that. Now, how do we do it? This is probably the most important graphic that I share with our clients or even have a conversation about. My clients have all passed that point in their life that unless they were to spend frivolously or invest all their money in a penny stock, chances are they're going to have more money when they die than what they have today. So this graph, as you can see it going down, actually could continue going up, which means that they're really the custodian or trustee for the next generation. But what they're not aware of is that they're partnering with the tax department on that money. So we have to go through that planning process to make sure they have a check mark. They're never going to run out of money. Here's the tax today. Here's the tax in the future. Here's the never spend money that they're never paying taxes on, that they're only paying taxes on. Can we use some of that money to preserve the estate for the family intact, or to incorporate philanthropy, or to do both? And that's really what all of our clients need. And why is that? Because they don't even realize how much tax is going to be payable. This is just a basket of the types of assets that appreciate that the government is going to want to participate in. And in Ontario, when you die, here are the tax bills. Registered assets, almost 54%. Any gains in private company shares or real estate or appreciated securities, 27%. Corporate holdings could be upwards of 70% if there's no post-mortem planning done. Passive income, Probate taxes, a statement. Basically what it says is that somebody can be worth 50 million, but once they do the planning, they realize they're only worth 35 million. It gets their attention. I just had a very nice 80-year-old woman, a widow, who built up an estate of $10 million. She's very good in the investment side, and she was feeling very proud of herself until I told her, Sandra, you're only worth $6.5 million. You know, I can't tell you some of the not nice words she said to me, but look at her. RIF was $3.5 million, and she had a $5 million non-registered investment portfolio with $1 million cost base. It's very easy to be worth less. So it's really important we do that. And how I introduce this with clients and you as advisors, I explain to every one of our prospects and clients that each of us have 3 possible beneficiaries to our estate. We've got family, we've got the government, and we've got charity. And each of us can only pick 2. Which 2 would you pick? Most people say family and charity. Of course, the government needs money too, but there are ways for us to do proper planning where you can actually be remembered for leaving a lot of money to charity as opposed to writing a big check to the tax department. Is that something you'd be interested in? Well, look at charity. Taxes are a reality in our society. We need it. We need it to keep our incredible social structures together. But this is a great quote. You have to pay your taxes, but there's no law that says that you have to leave a tip. So let's try to get away from leaving that tip through some of the things that we're going to speak about. Now, what we do is we create something called accidental philanthropists. And let me explain what that means. There are 2 types of people who give money. There are those who give it because it's part of their DNA, their education, perhaps they grew up in religious organization, whatever the case might be. They just have that muscle to give. And then there are those who don't. They never got that education. But when these people realize they have a choice where their taxes go, suddenly they become accidental philanthropists. And suddenly the people on the other side can give more for what they were originally contemplating giving, or give the same amount for less cost. So how do we do that? We have to identify who these accidental philanthropists are in our books of business. And here's just a big list. Widows, divorcees, and singles who are one incident away from a huge tax disposition. Anybody that you know who sold or will be selling a business or an investment portfolio or investment real estate, that's a great thing. We're going to go through a case study to explain that's the year they can be their most generous. Any one of your clients who have done or will be doing an estate freeze and are philanthropic, we'll go through a case study on that as well. Anybody who has a tax bill that will be due every April and they've got appreciated non-registered securities, great way to get rid of those taxes. Or if somebody has a foundation or a donor advised fund, like with Mississauga Community Foundation, we have ways to create transformational charity just using those donor advised funds. If they have an existing life insurance policy they no longer need, or they have an estate tax bill on death, or they've left a bill or a gift or bequest in their will, these are all people that we can help in a very significant way. And it's simple math. Let's just keep it very simple. For every $2 that you give to charity, you save $1 of tax. The beautiful part is that this is all backed by the government, and you can use charitable receipts in any given year to offset up to 75% of your net annual tax payable. And if you give more, then those charitable receipts can be carried forward for up to 5 years. But here's the part that people don't know about. At death, charitable receipts can be used to offset 100% of terminal estate taxes, including going back the year prior. So just think of that. With very simple planning and pennies for dollars, we can convert taxes into charity. Now we're going to go through just some gifting options, basic stuff that everybody knows, but then we'll play with some of the strategies and you'll hear how you can really help your clients in a big way. So we'll talk about gifting and will, which is known as a bequest. We'll talk about using your registered money for beneficiary designations. We'll talk about using appreciated securities, personal or corporate, and we'll talk about gifting life insurance. So let's talk about gifting in your will. Excuse me, as you can see, I just did this presentation for another charity, and my apologies. We're going to include, one thing you could do is just change your will and include the Mississauga Community Foundation in your will for a specific dollar amount or percentage of your estate. Remember, every $2 that you give saves $1 of tax. Or if you don't want to change your will, just notify your financial institution and you can get what's known as a multiple beneficiary form, which will allow you to indicate a charity for a dollar amount or a percentage of your registered money to charity. Now, why do I mention RSPs or RIFs? Because they are probably the biggest tax bomb that we have in Canada. And unfortunately, widows, divorcees, and singles are the most disadvantaged, because if you die and you have a spouse, everything rolls over to your spouse tax-free. The taxes are only due on the second to die. But if you're widow, divorcee, or single, you have a huge tax distribution upon your death. So somebody who's sitting there with $2 million of registered money, which is not unusual, just has to first realize they're only worth $920,000 if you pull them out now, or if they were worth $2 million upon your death. That's a big tax bill. That means the government's getting over half. So there are ways right now that we can take some of that income from the registered money to preserve the entire RIF or RSP for the family, or where we could instead be giving the money that's going to the tax department, give it to charity. So that's just something that really needs some attention. We'll talk about what we call the Rsp Rift Tax Converter as a case study later on. So the first thing we mentioned about gifting securities, it's amazing. Still in Canada, most Canadians are giving cash, checks, and credit cards for their charitable donations. And I want you to know that's the most cost and tax ineffective way to give. So here's an example of somebody who gave $50,000 of cash to charity. They'd have to make 100, pay tax, so they have 50 left to give to save 25,000 of tax. But if they're sitting there with $50,000 in shares that had a cost base of $10,000, well, if they were to sell those on the market, they would pay capital gains of $10,800. So the first thing our clients have to realize is your $50,000 is worth less than $40,000, number one. That gets them to think. But the beautiful part is you can donate those $50,000 in shares in kind to charity, pay no capital gains tax, and get a full charitable receipt for $50,000 to save the $25,000 of tax. Remarkably, in Canada, of all the taxpayers, only 5,000 taxpayers are using securities for donations. So if you have any clients who are giving cash checks or credit cards, tell them stop. They must have an ETF, a mutual fund, a stock, a segregated fund that's appreciated considerably over the last 10 years. Please use that instead. And here's a big thing for those people who have a donor advised fund at the Mississauga Community Foundation. I know I do this every year. I have a couple of donor advised funds, but what I do is at the end of the year, I look, what am I going to owe tax-wise in April? So let's just say it's a $50,000 tax. I take $100,000 of my appreciated securities. I find the biggest success stories because they have the biggest capital gains tax, and I put it into my donor advised fund. I get a charitable receipt that's going to save me tax going into the future. And now that $50,000 of tax has now become $50,000 of charity. And you don't have to decide yet where you want to distribute it. It can just sit there in the parking lot. Now it says the double play. The triple play, which I'm not going to go into too much, is if you have any clients who are sitting there with appreciated securities inside of a company, inside of a holding company, even more valuable. Why? Because for every dollar that they donate, they actually will reduce the company value by that dollar from a tax point of view. So they'll still get the same charitable benefits, but there's an added portion to that. And that is the gain. In this case, that $10,800, that gain, or the difference between the $50,000 and the $10,000, the $40,000 capital gain actually gets credited to the company's CDA, the capital dividend account, and now can come out of the company tax-free. If you pull $40,000 out of a company, you're going to only get 20 at the end of the day. Here you're getting the full $40,000. So make sure that you keep your eyes on the lookout for clients with personal appreciated securities, either personal or corporate. Now, we don't have a lot of tax shelters left in Canada. Other than these final four, we're actually, the government in the last budget sort of cut back on non-CCPCs, non-Canadian controlled private corporations in terms of all those offshore. Other than these four, you have your principal residence, you've got TFSAs, which are limited. You've got lottery winnings that are still not taxable here in Canada, so don't buy your tickets in the States. And you have tax-exempt life insurance. Other than these four, if your clients have any other assets, there must be somebody they love at the CRA, because that person has their hand out and wants to participate in anywhere between 27 and 55% of the success that you've had, other than these four. So it's really important for us to understand how these work to be able to help ourselves and help our clients. And here's just an example that all donations are not the same. This is something I put together with PwC, and it's showing the donation of $1 million. Somebody wants to give $1 million to charity, and we're going to compare giving cash, giving public securities with zero cost base, like a cannabis stock or something, the use of flow-through shares, which we'll talk about shortly, and the use of life insurance. And as you can see in the first category, to give away $1 million of cash costs about 50 cents on the dollar. If you gave shares, it's about 23 cents for every dollar you donate. If you can use flow-throughs, providing they're available and depending on what jurisdiction you're in, it could cost anywhere between 5 and 15 cents per dollar of donation. And finally, you can donate a life insurance policy, which only costs 12 cents per dollar. And the beautiful part is that charities today normally would only recognize you if you gave them cash today, or they recognize a bequest when you die to the estate. But today, the charities will actually recognize you for a future gift, providing it's structured properly. So just keep that in mind. Now, what about life insurance? And this is really an area that's just not understood. So we're going to say that there are 3 ways to give life insurance. Number 1, many of our clients have old life insurance policies that they took out years ago that they likely don't need anymore, or if they were to pay out, it really wouldn't move the dial on their estate values. So one thing you could do is you could take an existing life insurance policy, get a current fair market value assessment on that policy, and now donate it to charity, including your donor advised fund, get a nice charitable receipt that saves you a whole bunch of money today. And going forward, the premiums that you pay to the charity are considered charitable donations. So you're saving more tax along the way. So we just did this for a guy with, it was small, it was a $300,000 permanent policy they had. We did it with a university. He had been diagnosed with Parkinson's 6 years earlier. We got a $300,000 policy. He got $180,000 evaluation on that policy. So that saves him $90,000 of tax. And he didn't want to pay for the policy going forward in the future. So actually the charity will have a donor pay money to the charity to fund that policy. And the charity will recognize both the donor of the policy and the person who's donating money to fund that policy. So it's a great thing. The other thing is our clients might have old term life insurance policies, which, increase every 10, 20 years. They get canceled because they're just not needed or they're just too cost prohibitive. Well, if your client's health has gone awry, remember those policies can be converted at any time without any medical evidence into a permanent insurance policy. So we just did something also for a university where there was $1.5 million of term insurance. The donor of that term insurance got a charitable receipt for $540,000. Okay, they were uninsurable, and now that policy is owned by the university going forward. And that was a beautiful case because you can do a conversion, and that means the advisor gets paid, but it was great for the charity and great for the donor and great for the advisor. So don't cancel any term life insurance. Another option with life insurance is donating a new policy. So again, policy can be owned by the charity, in which case you get these charitable receipts. Or let's say your client has $1 million estate tax bill. Why not get a $2 million life insurance policy, which costs pennies, and own the policy until death, and have the beneficiary be a charity? So $2 million goes to the charity on death, creates a $2 million charitable receipt, and now $1 million of tax is eliminated, and that $1 million of tax become $1 million of charity. Very simple. The last thing is just go ahead and change the beneficiary on a current insurance policy. Our clients have policies, just tell them to change the policy and put a percentage amount or a dollar amount to the Mississauga Community Foundation or to whatever charities that they care about. And here's a big secret. It's actually a couple of big secrets, but this one I think is very important. Life insurance can be owned and paid for by a private foundation or a donor advised fund. Most people don't know that. That means you can take money that's already sitting in your foundation and use that money to buy and own a policy and pay for it with money that's in your foundation to create transformational charity going forward. And it's amazing how few people know about this. So it's really something that should be talked about and integrated. The other thing we're going to speak about, if we have a chance, is just the difference between private foundations versus donor advised funds. And if we have time, perhaps, Tom, you can remind me, we can address that in the question session. Here's an example of, I just want to give you an example of what I would like to see if I had my magic wand. This is what I would like to see for absolutely every affluent family and even just civilian families in Canada as part of their planning. So as you can see, here's a young couple, middle-aged couple. They're worth $60 million with kids and grandchildren. They like to minimize or eliminate taxes, and they have a strong desire to leave a legacy to charity. So if you can see here, before any planning, they had a $60 million estate. Family's going to get $40 million. There's going to be $20 million going to tax because they've got some low-cost real estate, and zero is going to charity. That's the reality, and that's probably the reality of 99% of our clients until they meet somebody like me and you. Because then we look at an estate estate bypass, and in this case, we go ahead and we incorporate an insurance policy of $20 million. Again, through a financing strategy. I don't want to get into the weeds, but at the end of the day now, the family gets $45 million. Taxes have been reduced to $5 million, and we've created a $20 million gift for charity. And here's the numbers before and after. So before the plan, the family only got 40 million. Now they get 45. So we bumped them up by 5 million. The taxes we bumped down from 20 million to 5. So we've saved 50 million of tax. But more importantly, we created $20 million of charity. This has to be part of absolutely every one of our clients' estate plans. Just some other giving strategies that I want to talk to you about. So one of them that we coined back in 2017 that was actually in the Globe and Mail as well is something we call CPP Philanthropy. And that's Canada Pension Plan. When you turn 65, you're entitled to receive CPP. I just turned 60, so I just initiated mine at age 60 at a reduced amount. I'll tell you why in a moment. But for most of our clients, when they get CPP, it's kind of cute. They go, I'm a pensioner now. But that money that they receive would not move the dial on their lifestyle expenses. For a husband and wife, it's about $26,000 a year. They get taxed on it. They reinvest it. They get taxed again. If they're philanthropic, there are 4 ways that they can benefit from the government benefits. One is they could take that $26,000 and they could create a $1.5 million life insurance policy. If they make that policy be owned by their donor advised fund or a charity, then the $26,000 is considered a charitable donation. Now there's no tax on the CPP, and they've created a $1.5 million gift. Alternatively, they can take that $26,000, pay tax on it, get the $1.5 million policy, but donate it on death to charity, which would get a receipt for $1.5 million, which would save the estate $750,000 of tax. That's the second way. The third way is get the CPP, get the $1.5 million policy, own it, make your children the beneficiary of that, so they get $1.5 million, and donate your registered money to charity. Remember we talked earlier about that $2 million only being worth $920? Well, now the family's getting 1.5 versus 920, and charity's getting $2 million. How great would that be? And the fourth one is really for your clients who believe that charity begins at home. Take that $26,000, get the $1.5 million policy, and leave it to your grandchildren. Okay, because remember, when you die, your CPP dies as well. Imagine taking that $1.5 million, and now there's going to be a fund that they could invest, let's say, with somebody great like Tom over at Asante. Let's say they get 5% on that. That's going to generate $75,000 a year in perpetuity, which they could then give to their grandchildren to give to charity. Imagine what kind of a legacy you'd be giving. And that's like a pension that you're creating for your grandchildren for charity. So don't let that little piece of planning, CPP, sort of fall by the wayside. Second one I wanted to talk about is something called charitable insured annuities. We're all familiar with annuities, and we might be familiar with something called a back-to-back or an insured annuity. But this is a special way where you're taking prescribed annuity tax rates, and you're taking philanthropy or tax, and you're taking philanthropy, and you're taking insurance and combining them together. The net result is this. For your clients who are looking for guaranteed cash flow. If they're over the ages of 60, they can get anywhere between 7 to over 10% guaranteed for life on their investment money with no interest rate risk and no market risk. Imagine that. And upon their death, there's an insurance policy that gets paid out to their charity. All right. This is, again, so we've written about this. To me, this is the best opportunity out there. And it's a great way for us to create compensation, but more importantly, to give those clients who are looking for income a way of continuing to do that. And if they're philanthropic, leaving something special for their families. So I just want to leave with 3 case studies, and then I really do want to open it up for questions. So I mentioned before, any of your clients who have sold real estate or real estate portfolio or business, that's the year they're going to have their biggest payday. It's also going to be the year that they have their biggest tax bill, but it's also the year they can make their biggest contribution to charity to mitigate that tax. So there's a family who sold $120 million of investment real estate. We're ending up with a $20 million tax bill, and they were going to just pay it until somebody suggested that they meet with me if they were philanthropic, and they were. What we did was we took 40 million of their 120 and we set up a private foundation for them. What that meant is that $20 million of tax now became $20 million of charity. Beautiful. Problem is the family's out of pocket $40 million, and G2 is going to be, hey, what about us? So what we did was we created an insurance strategy on a joint last to die basis to replace that money with $40 million for the next generation. And we used an immediate financing arrangement, which created a cash neutral structure for them to be able to have that $40 million and still have access to use of their money for business and investments, as opposed to being stuck in premiums. Net result, a family that had a $20 million tax bill created $40 million of charity, $20 million of tax became $20 million of charity, and we were able to get money back to the family on a very cost and tax effective basis. So whenever you have a client who sold something, talk to them about charity. What about estate freezes? So we had a family that did an estate freeze. I'll just give you again, there are ways wasting freezes to bring down the values or the tax bill, but I'll just give you a high level. This was an individual who did an estate freeze. State value, freeze value is $28 million, $7 million tax. Very good. Would you like to meet somebody who can help you to actually reduce your taxes by creating charity? Yes, introduction to Mark. What we did was we took the $28 million, which was his tax bill, and there is a way, instead of just donating public securities, you could actually donate private shares, private company shares to charity. Problem is that they're not marketable. You can't sell them. They can't. So what you do is you donate the shares to charity and you redeem them with insurance. So we created a $14 million gift to charity that ultimately, at the end of the day, turned the $7 million tax bill into a $500,000 tax bill. We created $14 million of charity. And then we also created a tax-free CDA to the next generation through the insurance of over $6 million. So that's the icing on the cake. And in this case, again, we used an immediate financing strategy. So the cost to that family is just under $2 million. So instead of a $7 million bill, for just under $2 million, they created a $14 million charitable donation and a $6 million tax-free CDA, all by just moving the shells around. The last one, which I love, is something we came up with. We call it the Rsp Rift Tax Converter. We like to find ways for our clients not to have to write checks to charity. We just want to find assets to move to them. So this was an individual, 65, who had a $2 million RSP. And he said, Mark, can I do something with my RSP? And we said, absolutely, you can. So we set up a donor advised fund where they were able to move the $2 million, and we got rid of the 30% withholding tax. There's a government form to do that. And he transferred the full $2 million to his donor advised fund. Remember, you can do this for any amount of your registered money. Now, the tax on that is 53.5%. With charitable tax credits, about 50%. So it's costing him 3.5% to give $2 million to charity that was only worth $920. Remember? So that's part one. Part two is now that the money's sitting in the donor advised fund, we used $1 million of that, or $100,000 a year, to create an insurance policy owned by their donor advised fund. Net result is they went from $1 million of tax to $4.5 million of charity, all by planning. So there's lots that can be done. And, we'd love to talk to people and educate advisors on this. There's so much opportunity we can be doing to collaborate. We've seen in our experience that there's 5 types of givers that are out there. Some people give, I want to be anonymous. Don't mention my name anywhere. If you do, I'll never give to you again. Those are great people, but they're amazing. But then there are the other ones that want other people to know, because it sets an example for others to follow in their steps and to copy what they're doing. Others do it because they want to be remembered. They want some immortality on a building or on an elevator or on a charity university. Others do it strictly because they want to save taxes, just a tax saving. But then there are others who do it because they know it's great for business. To be philanthropic and be an entrepreneur, it's the best. And I'll tell you, we've done so many gifts of people 27 years of age in their 30s where they were able to give $1 million to charity and be recognized for giving $1 million for pennies. And here's an example of a $1 million gift that we had created for St. Joe's Hospital of a young couple where they gave an insurance gift. And again, great photo opportunity, big check, and you can be certain that this got a lot of mileage. I'll tell you about one advisor, and I'm saying this to you as advisors. We work with I do a lot of mentoring. I have a mentoring coaching program with a fellow named Jim Ruda, and we have over 50 advisors that I basically teach them all of my strategies and practice management and sales. And we're going to be starting a new group if that's something you might be interested in finding out about. But one advisor that I mentored, in his 30s, I told him and his wife to buy a $1 million 10-pay life insurance policy and asked him, what's the largest charity in your area? So they gave it to a hospital foundation. So he now gave it to a hospital foundation. He's recognized as giving $1 million at a cost to him of $3,500 a year over 20 years. It's costing him $3,500 a year for 20 years to do this $1 million gift. He's now recognized on the wall of legacies. He's invited to all of the large major donor events. Those are for people who are actually writing checks for $100,000 a year. Those are the people that he wants to meet with, obviously. And now he's the co-chair of the Young President's Council of that hospital foundation, all by incorporating philanthropy into his business. And we wrote an article in Foundations Magazine, I think it was 2 months ago or 2 issues ago, about entrepreneurial philanthropy. And if you should really read it. It'll help each of us as professionals build philanthropy into our practices. Just to wrap up, I like to talk to all of my clients and prospects and mention that, or ask you a question. How many people know the names of their grandparents? Most of you would say you know the names of your grandparents. But how many of you know the names of your great-grandparents? Most people don't know the names of their great-grandparents. This is actually a picture of my great-grandparents, Aaron and Liebe Gross, in 1934 in Poland before they died in the Holocaust. As a matter of fact, today, interestingly enough, and I say that it should be a merit for him, but my great-great-grandfather died on this day. He was killed, he was murdered, unfortunately. His name is Elchanan Dov Ben Moshe, or the son of Moshe. And, obviously we have families that did incredible sacrifices to get us to this place today, but I'm digressing. Imagine if on January the 1st, you got an envelope in the mail and there was a check for $10,000 from your great-grandfather. You think you'd remember their name? Sure. Well, with proper planning, there are ways for you to be able to do that your kids can remember your name. And they say that people live once and they die twice. I understand dying once. Why dying twice? The second time they die is when people stop mentioning their names. They stop talking about them. So they say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's when the weather conditions are perfect. But when it's windy outside, the apple's far from the tree. And when there's a tsunami like there is today, the apple doesn't even know it came from a tree. So I say that, with things like religion, philanthropy, the combination, these are ways for us to be able to pass along our values, our traditions, our sense of social responsibility, our tzedakah, our justice, our righteousness, not just to our children, but more importantly to our grandchildren and to our great-grandchildren. And that all comes about through having the philanthropic conversation. So As far as next steps, I would suggest I have something called the 48-hour rule, which is if any of this made sense to you or resonated, do something about it. Do one thing about it. As far as no obligation consultation, that was meant for another group, but I'd love to talk to any advisor who would like to learn about it, who would like to collaborate. We collaborate with so many advisors as their philanthropic specialists, but don't ignore it. There's far too much on the line. We also have I've been writing for a publication called The Tax Letter since 2011. I have over 100 publications, mostly dealing with philanthropy and how a lot of these structures work, including one-pagers on everything that we spoke about. And also, you should consider joining the Cagp, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. Get involved with Willpower. Get your MFA-P, Master Financial Advisor in Philanthropy. I was on the faculty of that. It's a great program, not very long or expensive to be part of. But just do something. And the one thing I want to just end with is consider your own legacy gift. We have a lot of people on this call, here's an example of somebody giving $1 million life insurance gift, a single person. Okay, those are the ages, and they're healthy, non-smoker, and they're paying for 10 years only. And the numbers on the right are the net after-tax costs payable for 10 years in order to be recognized for giving $1 million gift. If we all did that just on this call alone, we'd have another $30 million of charity created in the world, which would be great. And just to sort of end off, our corporate goal has been to create $100 million of charity each year. We've done over $60 million the last 2 years, so over $100 million. But we have so many advisors who want to get involved with us, and what we've done is we've raised the bar. What we want to do is create a community of professional advisors and charities across the country where each of us, 100 of us, take on the role of wanting to create $10 million of charity. That could be through a bequest, through insurance, through, whatever, any type of thing. But if we have 100 doing $10 million, that's $1 billion of charity. And I believe that can be replicated every single year. We have about 24 advisors who have already stepped up, and we're working with about 60 charities in many different ways. So if you're involved with any charities, reach out to us. We can help you with that relationship with that charity, and we can work together. And last thing, we were the lead sponsor for the Cagp for their Leave a Legacy series. And there was a fellow who attended my event by the name of Nick. And Nick was a guy in his 70s, never was married, never had any children. And when he met me, he'd been involved in science and physics. He had about a $3 million tax bill on a state tax bill. So we started to do some planning, went to different charities to create something for him. And he kept delaying. He was a real Renaissance man. I'd be in touch with him. One day I called him a couple of years ago before COVID, and he told me it wasn't a good time. He was at Sunnybrook Hospital. He just had a heart attack. And he said he'd contact me when he gets out. Anyway, the next week I saw in the obituary section that Nick had died, and the funeral was the next Thursday. And I went to that funeral. It was very small. And I participated, and I just felt so sad that $3 million was going to be going to the tax department, and he couldn't take care of that legacy or something significant for himself. And that's because timing is everything. All of this has to be done while the sun is shining. And there's never been a better time for us and for our clients, especially with COVID and the sense of mortality, to be having this conversation with our clients. So I really do hope that everybody will be inspired by what we talked about, and people will take advantage and have this conversation with their clients. And hopefully we can do some amazing things together. So that is what I'll do, wrapping it up, and we'll leave hopefully some time for questions, Tom.
Great. Thank you very much. That was terrific. Mark, I've got one. You said to remind you about one item, and that was private foundation versus a donor advised fund.
Yeah. So people think that in order to have a private foundation or donor advised fund, your name has to be Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. As Tom mentioned at the beginning, it's probably the most hidden gem treasure that we have in Canada and nobody knows about, which is the donor advised fund. To have a private foundation, you need to have substantial wealth. You need to be putting at least $2 million into it. For somebody who wants control over that, they're going to have to pay some startup costs and some annual reporting fees, etc. versus having a donor advised fund where you can piggyback the Mississauga Community Foundation and use their umbrella to put your named fund underneath, which case they take care of all the administration and they take care of all the money management, and you can now distribute that money to any registered charity in Canada. The point that I wanted to make was that people have to realize that private foundations are actually public and public foundations are private. That means if you want, you can go to the CRA's website today and plug in the name, I don't know, come up with Thompson, on the star, whatever it is, just write in a family and you'll see they have a foundation and you'll see exactly how much money is in it, who their board members are, and exactly where they distributed that money. Whereas if you have a donor advised fund, it's completely anonymous. Nobody has to know anything about your business dealings. So if you have any clients that have a private foundation who don't want to continue with managing that, we're always showing people why they should take their private foundation and roll it into a donor advised fund. And the Mississauga Community Foundation is a great place to do that. Take a private foundation, let them take care of it for you. So that's what I wanted to say, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, another question. What is the minimum amount of money required to make a gift of life insurance?
Really, there's no minimum amount. You can have a $10,000 policy. They'll save $5,000 of tax and you'll be remembered for giving $10,000. Hey, that's a big number. Glen, I'm sure when you were out, fundraising at some point, finding $10,000 donors, they don't grow on trees. So it could be any amount at all. And, but I think it comes back to doing the planning to be able to see how generous you can be. Again, we want to figure out a way, how do we take those taxes that don't even belong to you and give those instead? Suddenly it makes it much easier to give because you're not giving something that belongs to you. It belongs to the government. And now you're turning it into charity, which is going to be great for your family's legacy.
Great. Thank you. And there's another one here. My RIF contains a large sum of money. Do I have to donate all of it or can I donate just part of it?
Absolutely. You can donate as little or as much as you want. Whatever you give, remember $2 tax, $1 savings. Again, because that's going to be taxed at such a high level, you're basically going to be taxed on that registered money, whether you like it or not, taking it out now or at death. So you have a choice. Give it to charity or give half to the government. And if it's only costing you really 3.5%, really to give that money, wow. Instead of it costing you 54%, it's only costing you 3.5% to create something very special. But it comes back again, Tom, planning. Do the planning, figure out what you can afford, because you might find out that you can be way more generous than you think.
Great. And there's one here. This is an interesting one. Mark, I'm 75 years old and I'd like to make a charitable gift of life insurance using money already in my donor advised fund. Am I too old? And then the second part there, can my donor advised fund actually own and buy a policy on someone other than me?
It's a great question. So first of all, you can get insurance up till age 85, providing you are insurable, right? We just did some insurance on a couple of 83-year-olds. But there's also a way that if you have two spouses, there's a certain arbitrage that they'll take, let's say, a 75-year-old woman and a 75-year-old man, and the actuaries will put them into an actuarial time machine where the pricing will, let's say, be based on a 65-year-old male, which is much more affordable. So you can set it up also on a joint last to die basis, but 75 is not unusual, as an age, providing somebody's healthy. And again, you also have to have somebody who can advocate for you while going through the underwriting process. There's a big difference between dealing with an advisor where your policies sort of go through the assembly line versus going to the decision makers. And then, yes, you could have other people who are not related to you, right? Who are family, let's say family members, not immediate family members, where your donor advised fund could be the beneficiary of that. So again, I'm very aware of the fact that there are people who will donate their policy to, let's say, a foundation. We do this, donate it to a foundation, person gets a charitable receipt, and a donor advised fund holder actually pays for those premiums with the understanding that when that person dies, those funds will flow into their donor advised fund. It has to be completely transparent, signatures, everybody knows what's going on, but it's absolutely possible.
Okay, perfect. And then getting back to that question, I guess there's a follow-up to that. You mentioned they can't be immediate family members. So they could be distant relatives or other parties? How does
Yeah,
that
again,
work?
you're gonna have to also find out, like, you're seeing more donor advised funds like community foundations like Mississauga, who are getting more. There's more attention being given on the life insurance side, and there are more consumers out there doing it, and more advisors as well. So you will have to check with your local donor advised fund to understand what their protocols are. You know, one public foundation, we just wrote the whole book on accepting of policies for them and with them, so that there's no misunderstanding and it's clear and it's tax efficient. One of the things about donating an existing policy that you have, just be very aware there's something called the 3 and 10 year redeeming provisions, and you have to be very careful when you donate that policy that instead of getting the fair market value, which is what you want, you might just get the cost-based value, which is pennies. You want the fair market value, and you don't want to get into a situation where you're offside with CRA.
Great. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our question and answer period, the end of our session today. Mark, a great big thank you from the Community Foundation of Mississauga. Terrific content, terrific presentation style. Glenn, did you want to say a final word?
Yeah, I just want to again say thank you very much to Mark for your time today. It's been a fantastic presentation and a lot of information, and we look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you, Mark.
Excellent. Well, I really enjoyed it. And as I mentioned, just take advantage of all of this while the sun is shining, and it looks outside like the sun is shining today.
Great. Thanks again. And thanks to all of you who attended today's session. Very much appreciate you attending. Take care.